What is up, everybody? As promised, New York Rangers, the good, the bad, and the ugly for the 2020-2021 season, or, really the 2021 season, because that's all we played games in. This took a while to make. I kind of started it about 2 weeks before the season ended, and just finished up on it today, now that school's over and I can relax a little bit. This is going to be a pretty long video, I would like to think. I put a lot into this. And I want to start a lot of conversations from this. I don't want this to be a video of just some clown, boring kid just talking about hockey. I want people to share their thoughts, and maybe I missed something, or maybe I'm wrong about something, and you guys can just let me know about that. But yeah, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let's begin. First of all, we're gonna start with the ugly because I want to end this video on a high note. I do. So the ugly things this season. Well, obviously, the first one you got to start with is the Tony DeAngelo incident. Him and Alexander Georgiev got into that fight in the hallway after a game. DeAngelo gets waived, does not play a single game, does not even practice with the team for the rest of the season. Pretty tough start to the season. A really bad start. I think it was the third game of the season. And already that's the locker room atmosphere created for the young guys. You could tell there was a lot of hostility amongst the team even before that incident. It just kind of seemed like everyone was at each other's throats. The players didn't look very happy. I made a point of bringing up around that point in the season that just the players looked miserable, and that's when you could tell they started, and I could be wrong in this by making this assumption, but the players almost looked like they were resenting David Quinn, and then in turn were taking that frustration out on each other. Early on in the season, like when Zibanejad was yelling at Buchnevich, or and Tony DeAngelo and Georgiev getting into a literal fist fight. So I don't know. Just not a good start to the season. Alexander Georgiev's regression. Georgiev had a terrible season. The guy had like one or two games where he was like, wow, this is a good backup goalie. And it was almost the guarantee, this guy is going to Seattle. There's just no way in hell they're not going to pick him. And then it's like, wow, we might have to bribe somebody to take this freaking guy. Because it was thought Georgiev probably could have fetched a first-round pick at the draft last year, or this year, had he had another good season, and we'd probably be lucky to get a 4th or 5th round pick for him because he had a terrible year. Brett Howden. I'm just going to say Brett Howden and leave it at that. We've all seen the games. The Artemi Panarin incident. Oh my God. Think about this Rangers team was one spot out of making the playoffs. Had Panarin not missed those 6-7 games, however many games he missed, and the Rangers go 500 in those games, that's 6 more points. That kind of changes changes the pace of the season a little bit. And when you string a couple wins together, you string 2 or 3, maybe 4 wins in a row, that could turn to 5 or 6 or 7, and you kind of ride that high. So who knows what happens if Panarin never gets pulled away? Thank you, Putin, or the other asshole. The Cjethsyt groin scare. This is not the first time Cjethsyt has had a groin problem, and with the goalie like Cjethsyt, who relies a lot on his flexibility, having multiple groin issues already is a bit of a red flag and a bit of a worry. And Trouba's head injury. Trouba definitely had a better season this year than last year, but a lot of his game is physicality because he can muck well in the corners and wins most all his puck battles. But other than that, he's not very fast. He's got a decent stick. He's good breakout pass, but he's not the fleetest of foot. And if this head injury stops him from being physical, well, that's a pretty big tool that Trouba loses, considering that's really the only tool he had for us this year. Because defensively, he was pretty solid, especially, like I said, mucking in the corners. And if we don't have that, well, that's $8 million of yikes right there. That's what I got for the ugly. Except for this part. I was very vocal about the Davidson and the Gorton firing, how upset and how frustrated I was, the lack of communication between the upper brass and the fans, leading us to kind of sit here and assume what happened. Because, listen, I will admit, if the firing was because Davidson and Gordon did not stick up for Panarin and their players after Wilson beat the shit out of basically our entire team, then I'd be pretty goddamn pissed too, and don't know if firing is the right thing, but I'd be pretty pissed off. There would be a lot of conversations to be had. But they claim that the quote had nothing to do with the reason they were fired. So if the quote had nothing to do with it, and if they didn't stand by the quote or weren't protecting their players, then why the fuck were they fired? Still, I'm not going to get into it. I have an entire, almost 30-minute video about this. I'm not going to get too into it. I'll just leave it at this. If it's because they didn't stand up for their players and they weren't in line with the team, I'll give the pass at this point. But if it's for any other reason, I think it's ridiculous. They built this team from the ground up, and they just get thrown to the side. So I'll just leave it at that. Like I said, I got a long video about it. I don't want to get any more in depth than I already have. Moving on. The bad. And please acknowledge bad in quotation marks, because this bad isn't like oh my god, like what is happening. It's just like bad is, let's put it as the not meeting expectations or just below average things that we notice. For example, the lack of point production from Kakko and Lafreniere. This is not saying Kakko or Lafreniere had a bad season. I am not saying that. I'm saying their lack of production led to bad things. Would it be great if they were both 40-point players this year, even 30-point players? Hell yeah, and we could have definitely used that, but they weren't, and that hurt us a little bit. Especially at the beginning of the season. Kakko at the beginning of this season, I'm not going to lie, at the beginning of the season, I had a lot of doubts about Kaapo Kakko. His first 10 games were terrible. I mean terrible. Worse than they were last year. His last 46 games were phenomenal. He might not have been scoring as much, but his play was there. The points need to come with it. Same thing with Lafreniere. There was only a few points this season. Lafreniere was like, he kind of looked at him, he's like, he looks a little slow. It doesn't look like he's all there. Almost looked like a role player. And then towards the end of the season, he's like, wow, this kid is snapping it around and looked really freaking good. So, again, this is not me sitting here saying Kakko and Lafreniere suck. I'm not saying that. I actually happen to enjoy their seasons. I'm just saying their lack of production hurt. Now, listen, I know David Quinn's gone, and I did make this slide before he was gone, but his ice time deployment was certainly part of the bad this season. Most notably with Jack Johnson playing almost 20 minutes a night for about the first 20-something games, or just about 20 games. Yikes. You have a lot of good young defensemen that were playing a lot better than he was. And he was running the show back there for some reason. Not to mention Brett Howden, who was already mentioned in this slideshow, and other players that were receiving a lot of ice and that really shouldn't. Colin Blackwell. Colin Blackwell played very well this season. I think we could all acknowledge that. And we're all happy how well Colin Blackwell produced. But what we're not happy about is that Colin Blackwell was having more ice time for players that should have had more ice time than he did. Julian Gauthier is one of those guys. Kaapo Kakko, Lafreniere. More ice time leads to I'm not going to get into it. I'm feeling myself getting frustrated. And Chris Kreider was a huge disappointment this year. Listen, I'm glad Kreider had 20 goals and 30 points in 56 games or however many games he played this year. I am. Like, his number-wise, his season wasn't bad. It was the inconsistencies of Chris Kreider that are screwing us. It's not the 5, 6, 7 games in a row where he's like, whoa. It's the 9, 10 games in a row where it's like, where the fuck is this guy? He's making $6.5 million, which, by the way, you take 6.5 divided by 81.5. He's taken up about 8% of the salary cap by himself. So, if you're gonna take up that much money, you kind of got to do something, man, because you're almost a tenth of this entire team that consists of 23 active players at a time on a full roster. So if you're going to be almost a tenth of that, we got to see more than disappearing and then being streaky as shit. For example, 4 times this season, Kreider went 4 or more games without a goal. Twice, he went 6 or more games without a goal, the longest being over 9 games without a goal. Let's see this. 9 divided by 56. So, 16%. So he had a point where 16% of the season he did not produce a single goal in a row, consecutively. I'm not saying he needs to be a goal a game, but for $6.5 million to go that many games without a point, it's tough. Especially when you look at other players around the league who are justifiably making $600 million. I'm not talking about the Lucics or the Neils. I'm talking about the recent players that are making as much money that Kreider made, that the models that we base Kreider's contract off of, producing a lot more than he has, is a little frustrating. Because Chris Kreider, when he's at the top of his game, is almost an $8 million player. He's unbelievable. He's irreplaceable. But when he is inconsistent, like he always freaking is, and he has those 4 to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games in a row where he's like, where the fuck is this dude? He screws us over. He puts us in a bad spot. You can almost argue he had 5 times where he went 4+ games without a goal, but those empty netters towards the end of the season saved his life. So I was very disappointed about Kreider this year. I am very vocal of how disappointed I am with Kreider over the past years as a whole. It's frustrating when the guy that we consider a leader, and take the point production out of the equation. His actual on-ice play where he just disappears and you do not see him. You don't even notice him. He's not forechecking. He's not backchecking. He's just not doing anything. He's literally invisible out there. He's as useless as Brett Howden. So I just, when he disappears like that, it's very, very frustrating to watch, especially when he's making as much money as he is, and you need him to be a leader on this young team. Because that $6.5 million, if that just magically disappears, we don't worry about re-signing our young guys in a few years. But because that contract is here, and because that contract is now, his contract is going to get in the way of us keeping and or bringing in other players. So if you're going to make that much money, you got to fucking earn it. $6.5 million is not a joke. It's a lot of money to be paying somebody, especially in a league where the cap will not be moving. So he's got to figure out something. I don't know what it is, but he cannot be as inconsistent as he is. If you have a couple bad games, we're all human beings. If you have close to 10 games in a row without scoring a goal, making as much money as you are, and it's for nothing else other than you just fucking disappear, it's a problem. It's a big problem. I know I just went on a total tirade on Kreider there, but man, it's hard to call this guy a leader when honestly at times he's not leading. He's just there. He's just there, and you don't even notice that he's there, but he is. He's just here. Just here. And it's frustrating to watch. Julien Gauthier sophomore season. I'm not gonna say Julien Gauthier was a disappointment as much as his ice time deployment was disappointing. I look at Julien Gauthier as a more consistent in terms of effort level. Chris Kreider with hands and a shot. Although I think Chris Kreider has a much better shot than Julien Gauthier. I don't think Julien Gauthier has a muffin of a shot, but it's not very apparent. A lot of Julien Gauthier's chances come in tight, in close after making a gross move. I don't understand why Julien Gauthier kind of got pitch and tossed at the bottom of the lineup and out of the lineup for the majority of this season when he outplayed consistently guys like Cjethsyt, Blackwell, and Kreider, and Howden. I don't understand why. I mean, if you're going to say it's for lack of production, well, you're putting him out there 7 or 8 minutes a night at the most sometimes. What do you expect from the guy, especially when you're putting him on lines with Rooney, Howden, and Cjethsyt and guys who aren't going to score? If you put a guy like Julien Gauthier, and I'm not going to say Connor McDavid because that's just ridiculous. Anybody would be. I mean, Zach Cassian was almost a 30-goal scorer with Connor McDavid. But if you took Julien Gauthier and put him on a line with someone like, I'm trying to think of a player that's like a middle of the pack, just like an elite player, like a Mark Scheifele, or who's just like a solid. You know, he's a first-line center, but he's not like top of the league. Like not anymore. Maybe years past Claude Giroux. Like Claude Giroux is a first-line center these days. He's not top of the league anymore. But like with a Claude Giroux or a guy that can dish, or a guy that breaks the net, like. You put Julien Gauthier with the right player. Gauthier is probably a 50 or 60 point player, and he's creating chances, and he's an exciting player. So I don't understand why he was thrown to the side as much as he was this year. In my opinion, watching Julien Gauthier, there was only 2 games I watched Julien Gauthier all season where he looked like he had zero effort level and did not want to be there. And those are the last 2 games before he had that giant stretch where we just didn't see him until the end of the season. And I think it's ridiculous that we saw that, especially with a kid like that with size and speed. Those are 2 things you need in today's NHL. Size and speed. The size to protect the puck and the speed to keep up with the players around you. And I just don't understand why we did not see more of Julien Gauthier this season. Now, granted, it's a new regime coming in next year. I don't know who the next head coach is going to be. Whoever it is, I just hope that he gives young guys the chance to succeed and puts them in a place to do so, because Julien Gauthier is going to go somewhere else and we're going to be like, wow, we let this kid go. It's just going to happen. Inconsistent backup goaltending. This kind of going back to Georgiev and a little bit of Keith Kincaid. Although Keith Kincaid had a couple games this year where he was pretty damn good, but inconsistent backup goaltending where we're kind of like retreating back to the days of where Henrik Lundqvist was the goalie and there was really no backup. Like the days when Lundqvist was playing 60 plus, almost 70 games some seasons, whereas like you put the backup in, it's not a guaranteed loss, but it's quite close. And if the Rangers become this reliant on their goaltender now, imagine what it's going to be like years down the line. Listen, that Rangers team that made the Stanley Cup Finals was a fun and exciting team to watch, but Henrik Lundqvist, for his entire career, took the Rangers from being a pretty good middle of the pack, definitely a playoff team, to Stanley Cup contenders multiple times. And we cannot rest on our goalie just carrying us over and over again, or we're going to just have a repeat of what we went through in the late 2000s to the early 2010s. We need to be able to have a team around our goaltender where the goaltender is just an asset, not the asset. Not that Cjethsyt cannot be the asset, but we just don't rely everything on him. We got to have consistent backup goaltending. We got to have a team in front of our goaltender that makes us a viable top-tier playoff team, not just the goaltender himself. We're the worst face-off team in the NHL, 44.5% in the dot. The second last place team was at 45.3%. I think that was Vancouver, and they've been playing against Calgary, so that number's probably going to continue to increase. They might hit 45.5% by the end of the season, which would put them an entire percentage point ahead of the Rangers. That is bad. Mika Zibanejad had the most defensive zone face-off losses in the entire NHL. He had over 220, I think it was, face-off losses in the defensive zone. That is really bad. Ryan Strome, of every single player in the NHL that had 650 face-offs or more, Strome had the worst face-off percentage. I think he was at like 43.6% or something like that. That's terrible. And I'm a big praiser of Ryan Strome, but with a face-off rate that low, you make yourself expendable and you're hurting your team a lot. Controlling the puck is everything in today's NHL. It's not like the old days where the guys controlling the puck, you could just come across and punch them right in the mouth. You need to control the puck in today's NHL. You got to be able to protect it and control it, because that's what the winning teams are doing. We saw with the Islanders. They would score a couple goals on us, they would control the puck on us, tire us out, and then score a couple more goals. It's all about control and blown leads. Oh my God. I don't know the third period numbers in the NHL this year, but I guarantee you the Rangers are one of the worst third period teams in the league this year, and it would not surprise me. I don't want to get too much into the bed because I want to start moving on to the happy, because I feel myself getting frustrated. I'm already scratching my hand. I'm just getting frustrated because. Let's move on. The good. Now let's get to the good, and let me take a sip of water because the good is long. That's what she said. There were a lot of good parts this season. I actually still believe that this season the goods outweighed the bad and the ugly. I think the goods this season are immeasurable to what it's going to create for the future. Let's talk about the unbelievable growth of our young players. Kaapo Kakko went from last year being the worst defensive player in the NHL to, according to what is that website? Ooh, hold on. I think it's Evolving Hockey. It might be. I could be wrong on that. Being one of the best all-around players in the entire NHL, up there with the likes of Mark Stone. Okay, damn. Especially defensively speaking, I wish I would have screenshotted the numbers, but Kaapo Kakko was one of the best defensive players in the entire NHL this year. I think he was top 4. Bergeron, Stone, and one other player were on that list, and Kaapo Kakko was up there with them. That's pretty unbelievable. Alexis Lafreniere, his last 10-15 games looked like a first-line winger. He went from looking like this season he'd be like a middle-of-the-pack player, like just a contributor, to like this kid could carry a line by himself good. Philip Hedl. Now, his production might not have been there, but there were times where Philip Hedl had the puck, and it was like, get out of this kid's fucking way. He was flying at some points during this season, and I think he took a big step. Now, his production does need to increase, but as a player, just from the eye test, Philip Hedl was playing off his ass this year. And Keandre Miller, I mean, this kid went from a guy that might, 5th or 6th guy, probably get health bombed a few times, to being our defenseman with the second most ice time deployment behind Adam Fox. Damn. I mean, Keandre Miller had a pretty good season. I mean, there are definitely some things that he needs to work on, especially defensively, but I think overall his game was unreal this year, and it was very fun to watch. The good part, too, the emergence of young prospects and getting their first taste in the NHL. We saw Justin Richards, Tarmo Reunanen scored in his first game. Zachary Jones did not look out of place in his games, and Vitaly Kravtsov looked pretty damn good, too. Now, I wish Kravtsov would have gotten a little bit more ice time, but when Kravtsov was out there, I mean, it took him a few games to feel like extra comfortable, but like he fit right in. The kid just played his balls off, and that's all you could ask for. I was very happy with the way all three of these guys pictured right here looked, and I definitely think they should all get a look and probably earn a roster spot next year, depending on who the Rangers bring in next season via trade or free agency. But the fact that we had this many kids make their debuts this year, get their first points, get their first taste in the NHL, and they looked good and they looked ready is a big deal, man. Especially a kid like Zachary Jones, who could be just as good as Adam Fox if he grows correctly. And Vitaly Kravtsov, man, this kid could be a line carrier in the top 6 one day. The way he stick handles, the way he protects the puck, the way he shoots, the way he back checks, the way he forechecks. He doesn't do a thing wrong, and he's very fun to watch. And Tarmo Reunanen is no slouch, man. And he gives me some Anton Stroman vibes. He's just good all around and a very good skater. Very excited for Reunanen, and I hope he gets a spot next year. The good part 3. This is like the big one for me. Cjethsyt becomes the number 1 goalie. There was conversations that Cjethsyt and Georgiev were going to split that this year. Whether it's an indictment as to how bad Georgiev played or how good Cjethsyt played, I don't know. But Cjethsyt was absolutely 1,000,000% the Rangers' number 1 goalie this year and is a number 1 goalie in the NHL. The kid was just lights the F out this year at points. I mean, scary good. Adam Fox not only became a number 1 defenseman for the Rangers, but probably became the number 1 Norris Trophy candidate this year. Played out of his mind, and if he plays half as good as he did this year for the rest of his career, then we got a really good defenseman in front of us. Adam Fox was unbelievable this year, and he was very fun to watch. Man, this is an exciting time for Rangers fans, and I think Adam Fox is a candidate to be the captain and be the number 1 player on this team going forward. Pavel Buchnevich breaks all the way out, and when I say that, I mean he went from being a guy that's like a middle 6 contributor to a Marian Hossa type. Maybe not offensively, but he's like a poor man's Marian Hossa. Marian Hossa at the top of his game. Let's put it like this: if I'm rating a player on a scale of 1 to 10, Marian Hossa at the top of his game was like a 9.3 or 9.4. Pavel Buchnevich is the poor man's version of Marian Hossa. He is like 80% of Marian Hossa. He would be like an 8.5 or an 8.6. He was scoring, he was defending, he was doing literally everything this year. And it's a guy that I think you can win with and need to have on this team in order to win. So I hope they find a way to keep Pavel Buchnevich going forward and they don't look to move him, because if they move him, I think we're going to regret it, because he has turned into a very, very well-rounded player. And one thing you do got to give David Quinn credit for is he molded Buchnevich to a pretty badass player. And then Artemi Panarin. Just Artemi Panarin. Third in the league in points per game this year. So, damn. He was at a 1.3. McDavid was at like a 1.88. I think Cjethsyt was at like a 1.48 or something like that. But third in the league in points per game. Pretty damn impressive. The good part for it's the unlikely heroes. The Kevin Rooney's, the Colin Blackwells, the Chris Knoblauchs, the Jacques Martin. Sorry that you're not going to be here next year. The Keith Kincaid having a few really, really good games. Brendan Smith, 100% being a number 5 or number 6 defenseman. A guy that I hope we at least give a look to bring back. And Phil DiGiuseppe. Even though he didn't have a great season, he was still pretty damn good. But it's the unlikely heroes. It's the players that kind of came out of nowhere, filled in, shut their mouths, shut their damn mouths, went to the rink every day, and just contributed. I want to specifically highlight Smith, Blackwell, and Rooney. Now, I'm not a hater of Colin Blackwell. I think there were times where he got too much ice time. But to sit here and say that Colin Blackwell's season was unbelievably out of place for him is an understatement. I mean, this guy came in as expected to be like a number 1 player in the minor leagues as an emergency call-up, and then he earned a roster spot and was consistently one of our better players this season. Now, he has a lot of moments where, like, when he becomes a hot scorer and teams know to, cover him a little bit, he disappears. But when he's not the main focus of the other team's defense, he's pretty damn impressive and a good little depth piece to have. Kevin Rooney, definitely our best penalty killer, one of our better face-off takers, and kind of like a Dominic Smith type for us. Not as good as Dominic Smith was as at his peak with the Rangers during that cup run, but still a damn good player and someone I hope we keep around. And Brendan Smith, just Mr. Everything for the Rangers. He was defending well. He was actually creating offense. He was very physical. He stood up for the young guys, and just a guy that I hope the Rangers find a way to bring back without overpaying. I was a very, very vocal about disliking the Brendan Smith contract when he earned it 4 years ago. I was very outspoken about that, and I still think it was a bad deal. But right now, if you can bring back Brendan Smith for a year or two at like a cap hit under $1.5 million a year, I think you do it. I think he earned that much. The good part 5, the standings. For a team that played in the toughest division in the NHL to finish 16th in the league, not that bad. 10th in the NHL in points per game, 14th in the NHL in goals against per game, 14th in power play, and 10th in penalty kill percentage. So the Rangers were in the top half of the league in everything this year for the most part. I mean, granted, 16th isn't the actual, it's not actually top 50%, but pretty much is kind of deal. Right? It's like top 49%, so pretty damn good. I'll friggin' take it. Just very impressive season for the New York Rangers, and I don't think it should be slept on. We were one spot out of making the playoffs. One spot. That's pretty impressive for the youngest team in the NHL, and I think that's something that we should be very excited about as Rangers fans. The fact that we almost squeaked into the playoffs this year when in a pretty tough freaking division, so it's not something you should really sleep on. Moving on from this, there's not really much more I gotta say about this, just that. The future. Let's talk about this. Let's do the prospect watch first. Nils Lundqvist, I think, is going to fight for and probably earn a spot on this team next year. Whose spot he takes, I don't know. And the reason I'm going to do the prospect watch first because it's probably a good chance we don't see more than 2 of these guys actually make the team next year because if the Rangers are trying to be competitive, there won't be as many young guys. But Nils Lundqvist will be in North America next year, whether it's with the Rangers or Hartford, I don't know. I'm going to assume it's going to be the Rangers because of how good he's played, but you never know. Tomo Reunen is definitely going to be fighting for a spot. I think he honestly earned one. Lauri Pajuniemi probably will be in the AHL next year, but he might get a couple games. The kid has just been lighting it up in the league overseas. If you don't follow Statboy Steven or AJ Nunn on Twitter, I suggest you do so. They will know a lot more about this guy than I do. I just watch the videos they post to him on Twitter, and god dang, does this kid look good. Tim Gettinger, I think at this point, is just about ready to make the NHL. I thought he was ready last year, but we didn't really get to see him very much. Big guy, skates very well, just good all-around player. A guy you can call up a good 13th forward, at least for now. Zach Jones, I don't know if he makes the NHL next year, but I think he at least earned the chance to get a look. Like I said, I didn't think Zach Jones looked out of place this year. I just don't know if developmentally the Rangers want to rush him into the NHL right away next year. If they want to give him a little bit of time in Hartford. I'm definitely a fan of him maybe getting a few games, maybe a week or 2 in Hartford before playing in the NHL. But if the kid earns a spot, the kid earns a spot. Who might I say no? Mason Garrison, the only reason I really think I think I might have spelled his name wrong. I think it's Geertsen, not Geerstn, whatever. The only reason I think he gets a look is because the Rangers need toughness, apparently. So I don't know if defensively he's good enough to play in the NHL yet, but I guess we'll find out. Ty Ronning had a coming out party in the AHL this year. Went from a dude that we were probably just going to release this year and let him go to, wow, we need to re-sign this guy because at the very least he's going to be the leader in Hartford next year. Probably the top scorer, one of the top scorers in the entire AHL. Justin Richards, he got a taste of the... Did I put Tim Gettinger twice? I did. Nice. Justin Richards did get a taste in the NHL this year. He didn't look bad in his first game. Hell, he got a point out of it, so... Does he fight for a spot? I don't know. But, yeah, you never know. You never know. Let's take a look at free agency first before we look at the trade targets because this is like the most cost-effective thing to do is go through free agency. If the Rangers are looking at face-off takers and guys I need there, look no further than Danault and Bozak, both over 50%. Philip Danault was thought to be a trade target for the Rangers this year. At last, they didn't go after him. I thought they should have, especially if the price wasn't high, but they didn't, so it is what it is. Not going to lose sleep over it. Tyler Bozak, just one of those guys, you know, you can just buy low cost, high reward kind of deal. I mean, it is like low risk. Like, why not if he's available and you need somebody? Jordan Martinook, I would love. Misa Svechnikov, that guy. Great all-around player, good for the bottom 6, physical. Cjethsyt, if the Rangers can somehow swindle Cjethsyt away from the Islanders, that's personally my favorite candidate we have for the fourth line next year. If we can bring in Casey Cjethsyt, I think the Rangers team does a 180 in terms of physicality and effectiveness on the fourth line, but I'm not paying Cjethsyt more than $2 million a year, and he's coming off a contract where he's making over $3 million a year, so I don't think we see him. Blake Coleman would be excellent in the Rangers' bottom 6. He definitely pushes out some young guys, so we'll see if the Rangers go this route, but I definitely think he'll be a target if he does not take a huge discount to stay in Tampa Bay. And it is someone the Rangers are going to look at hard, I believe. Joel Armia, not a bad little bottom 6 guy. Not overly, just one of those guys that's very, very well-rounded. Definitely a better version of Phil Cjethsyt. Same thing with Brock McGinn. I think Brock McGinn is more of a power forward type. He's pretty tough. I'm going off based on what my buddies tell me who are Hurricanes fans. And I watched Brock McGinn. They said he's definitely slowed down and dropped off a little bit from years prior as to how effective he is as a player, but he's still a pretty damn good player. Barclay Goodrow, same thing here. I'm kind of just going with guys that are just a little bit tougher, fit into the bottom 6, and you don't have to overpay for them because I don't think the Rangers are going to overpay long-term in free agency this year. There's just not a player that really beats that. And then options for your 5th/6th defenseman, I think, for the Rangers this year are David Savard and Jamie Alexiak. And they very well may not pick up any defenseman in free agency this year because we have enough defensemen going forward. One thing I did not make on this was a projected roster for the Rangers next year, assuming they make 0 moves. Just because there's just so many moves that could possibly happen. I don't want to spitball when it's impossible to predict what the Rangers are going to look like next year because there's just way too many players fighting for way too many spots. Way too little spots. We're going to take a look at our trade targets. Jack Eichel is obviously the number 1 trade target. Jack Eichel is Jack Eichel no matter what injuries he has or has had. It's going to cost a lot to get the guy, and money-wise, the Rangers don't got to worry about making it work this year or next year, but the year after when you got to re-sign everybody. So they're gonna have to figure something out if they do go for Jack Eichel. I'm a big fan of going after a big number one center. I think the Rangers need that right now, but I do think if they do it, it's going to mean parting ways with Ryan Strome, which I'm a little iffy about because I think him and Panarin's chemistry is not really something you want to break up. Now, granted, you could put anybody with Artemi Panarin and make him a good player, but Ryan Strome has been a very big part of the New York Rangers since he's arrived here. But if you do bring in a guy like Jack Eichel, you got to expect Ryan Strome will be on the way out because Ryan Strome's going to be the guy you put on the third line when his face-off percentage is only 43-point-something%. Rangers, if they make a move for Jack Eichel, they're going to have Zibanejad and Eichel as your 1-2 in any order, in no particular order. And you're going to need a third-line center that's going to be able to win face-offs, play defensively, and play physically. That could be any number of guys I listed on the left, but it probably one of these trade candidates I'm going to make my way to in just one moment. Alexander Barkov being another trade target. I don't think Alexander Barkov is going to be traded by the Florida Panthers, especially the way he's playing right now. If Alexander Barkov is ever going to leave the Florida Panthers, it's going to be via free agency. I don't think the Panthers move him, especially if they're a playoff contender again next year. Sean Monahan was one of my favorite players in the NHL for the past bunch of years, but this is right now for me buyer beware. Hip injuries, inconsistencies in play, not as physical as he used to be, not winning as many faceoffs as he used to, just kind of a guy that fell off. Now, this could be an indictment of how the Calgary Flames have handled their players, but it could also be maybe some red flags of a player that peaked too soon. My number one candidate for the Rangers third-line center, the guy I want the most, Anthony Cirelli. I don't know what the cost is going to be to get an Anthony Cirelli. I don't know. Let's look him up. I don't know how he did this year. But he would be a guy I would really like the Rangers to get. I would love Anthony Cirelli. I've sung Anthony Cirelli's praises for a number of years now. I wanted the Rangers to get Anthony Cirelli in the Ryan McDonagh trade, and they did not. But he would be a perfect number 3 center behind Eichel and Zibanejad if the Rangers do get Jack Eichel. At only 23 years old, at a cost-controlled contract, a physical player, not undersized at 6 foot, but not oversized either. He moves well. Not a disappointing season, but not a great season. 22 points at 50 games is what I'm looking at right now on HockeyDB. Just would be a nice add, especially to get Tampa Bay to get out of cap trouble. I'd imagine Cirelli would be a guy they'd look to move because they could replace him. But I think he'd be awesome for the Rangers third line. Now, if the Rangers need a backup option for the third line, assuming they acquire one of Jack Eichel or Monahan or Markov, I don't think Tomas Hertl is a bad option for the third line either. I just don't know if Tomas Hertl is like saying, hey, I'm down for a third line role. I think this guy's a number 1 or number 2 center on the team. More so a number 2 center than a number 1 center, but if you could sneak him in on the third line and get him cost-controlled long-term, not a bad third-line center to have. I just don't think it happens. I think Tomas Hertl, if you get him, you're investing in him for a year or two before he hits free agency, and then he's going to walk, make a lot of money, and play a top 6 role elsewhere. Same thing with an Elias Lindholm. I think he's more of a backup option over the guys above him, and it's not really somebody I want on this team. I don't think Lindholm would fit in well with this team. He's basically just a younger Ryan Strome. We don't really need that right now. If the Rangers are going to make a move, it should be for somebody big, not for someone that's just going to replace the guy that you already have. The Rangers right now should be looking to upgrade with the young assets they have, not looking to make lateral moves. So, Matthew Tkachuk, there's a lot of talk about Matthew Tkachuk and whether or not he fits in with the team because he plays left wing. You're talking about a player that plays in the NHL. I think he's pretty damn good at hockey. I think him moving from the left to the right, or another player on the team moving from the left to the right, it's not that big of a deal. I think he'll be okay. Now, the question is this. Do the Rangers have room for him on either side of the puck? Because the Rangers are pretty stacked up on the wings. I think the Rangers do not make a move or acquire Matthew Tkachuk if they find a way to get rid of Chris Kreider, which I do not believe happens. I mean, you'd have to pay someone a pretty penny to get rid of Chris Kreider, which is why I wish they would have just traded the bastard last year at the deadline. But they didn't, so it's neither here nor there. If the Rangers find a way to offload Chris Kreider, then I think Matthew Tkachuk should be their number 1 player to pick up this year. Because if people are going to sit here bitch and moan that, we need to be more physical, then why are you not looking at Matthew Tkachuk? The Calgary Flames are in the middle of a fire sale, and if he becomes available to any capacity and he's not costing you a number 1 top asset, I don't know how you do not consider and or throw the fucking world at this guy, because this is the guy that could score, play physical, and doesn't really take that many dumb penalties for a guy that's as physical and annoying as he is. Trent Frederick, I put in here as just 4th line option, over 50% in the faceoff dot. Plays a physical game, good in the bottom 6. I wanted to get him years ago. The cost of him would maybe be like a 4th-round pick. Probably not much more than what the Rangers lost Brendan Lemieux for, or traded Brendan Lemieux for. I would love Trent Frederick on the 4th line. I think he'd fit in awesome with this team because he's a new generation, tougher player that can kill penalties and win faceoffs. Same thing with Boone Jenner as Trent Frederick. Would not cost much to get him. You got a year of control with him afterwards, and he's an unrestricted free agent. Makes $3.75 million. So if the Rangers do get him, I wonder if Columbus retains salary or just decides they don't want to trade him because they're probably not going to get very much back for Boone Jenner if they do decide to move him. So there might just be a guy like, you know what, let's just hold on to him and see what happens. Personally, if I'm the New York Rangers, my most ideal offseason ever. If I'm just filling holes on this team or upgrading on this team. Obviously, Jack Eichel's the number one guy you get. And then if the Rangers somehow have assets afterwards to get a guy like Anthony Cirelli, I would love to have a center core of Eichel, Zibanejad, and Cirelli as their 1, 2, 3. And a 4th-line center after that. It's not bad to have, what's his name as your 4th-line center, still Kevin Rooney. But if you're needing someone that's going to just win face-offs and you want to move Rooney to the wing, look no further than the guys I have listed on the left-hand side. And Philip Deneau would not be a 4th-liner, but maybe like a Martinook, Cjethsyt, a Bozak, or a Coleman, or someone along those lines. I prefer Trent Frederick as your 4th-line center, but I don't think they trade for him. I don't think Boston trades him. But in a perfect world, Eichel, Cirelli, and Frederick would be the 3 guys that got acquired by the Rangers this offseason. I just don't know if it happens. It would be pretty damn cool if it did, though. It'd be even cooler if the Rangers got Eichel, Cirelli, Tkachuk, and Frederick, but, I'm living in a fantasy land right now, so. It won't happen. It would be nice if it did. If the Rangers got any of these guys that I listed, I would be happy. I just don't think, I don't know. But the Rangers are just going to surprise us and just do some weird shit in the offseason, and we're just going to either be disappointed or be like, meh, all right. Players possibly on the move. Smith might walk. Blackwell, Georgiev, Gauthier, one of them's going to get plucked. The ones that don't are probably going to get traded. Kreider I put up there because I bet you the Rangers at least entertain the idea of moving him or just see what they can get for him, if anything. The only reason I put Strome up there is because the Rangers are definitely looking to upgrade at second-line center, and Strome's name's been thrown around since the day we acquired him. Buchnevich, I hope we do not move him. I wonder if they're afraid of not being able to re-sign him next year. I wouldn't pay him more than $5.5 million a year, so if they can get like a 6 or 7 year deal at $5.5 a year, I think it's a great deal for Buchnevich. Otherwise, that money might be more well spent in that upgrading the second line center. And Philip Keedle would probably be the guy moved to upgrade at second line center as well. So we'll see what happens with him. But no matter what we look at the end of the day, let's fucking go Rangers. This team is set up for the future no matter what the hell they do this season. We have assets at every single position. We are deep at every single position, and no matter what we do, the Rangers are in pretty damn good shape going forward, and we should all be excited and happy about that. So I'm going to go ahead and end the video there. I want you guys to comment your thoughts about anything you agreed with, disagreed with, or something in between. Or maybe I missed something. Maybe I missed something ugly. Maybe I missed something bad. Maybe I missed something good. Just comment down below. I want to hear you guys' thoughts. I want to start a conversation. I mean, right now this is the Rangers off season, so we don't really have much to talk about. So let's start a conversation. What do you guys think? And just comment down below your thoughts. I'm excited for what the future holds, guys. I'm really excited. I'm ready to go. I'm hyped up for the 2021 offseason. I want to see what the Rangers do. I hope they make some big moves. Like I said, I'm a dreamer. If they could get Cirelli, Tkachuk, Frederick, and Eichel all in the same offseason, fucking go for it. I mean, so long as you're not giving up Kakko, Lafreniere, Fox, or Miller, or any super high up there assets. Now, granted, that wouldn't happen. But still, I'm going to sit here and dream. I might fire up NHL and just make all those moves happen in my video game because it's not going to happen in real life. So let me just live my fantasy. It's all right. Thank you everybody for watching the video. For watching. Consider making it end for hearing aids. I appreciate you guys watching. As always, please comment down below. Let's start a conversation. Let's talk. Let's figure this out. Let's fucking go Rangers. I'll see you on the next one. Thank you for watching. Peace.